We've been very fortunate in this event that we've only had one confirmed case in what's called the index animal, or the index case, and that is the one animal. However, there have been numerous contacts between humans with humans and other animals with the infected animal.
This office is in charge of investigating all rabies exposures or potential exposures. So when we have a rabid animal like this in the city, everybody that had contact with that and every animal that had contact with that is considered a potential for exposure.
When this dog, it was in Zilker Park, and it was, I guess, freely around the park, so there's concern of exposure. The nose-to-nose sort of exposure that other dogs might have had being in contact would be that sort of saliva getting on mucous membranes and that concerning exposure where that could be transmitted, as well as with other humans.
At this time, we have approximately 8 animals that had potential exposure with this dog, and of those, 8 are in home observations for either 45 or 90 days, and we have 1 that is currently here under a 45-day observation. There are no other dogs at this time that are showing any signs of rabies. We're getting close to the end of the incubation period, so if there were any, we would know rather quickly.
As you know, the way it's transmitted is when the saliva of an infected animal, either through a break in the skin or is exposed to the mucous membranes of an uninfected either animal or person. As I think you've heard of now the assessment with the exposures to the animals. With the humans, we have been following, there are I think 6 individuals now that have either started post-exposure prophylaxis or we're assessing them for that. And so if there is a human who's had what's considered an exposure that would be of concern where there could potentially be a transmission of rabies, then we work with them. There's treatment post-exposure prophylaxis where you can get immunoglobulin and vaccine that can then prevent that individual from developing rabies. We have just recently identified through our investigation a concern about a child, an elementary school age boy, blonde-haired, light-skinned, that was there, that was playing, I think, fetch with the dog for about 15 minutes in Zilker Park. And so that sort of exposure is concerning with the level of exposure that one might get to the saliva of this dog. So we are trying to identify this individual. I mean, what we've heard, I think the boy was with 2 other women, that they all were speaking another language, seemed more like a European type of language. So that's the information that we have, and we're trying to get that message out to try to identify that individual. The incubation period for rabies is typically from 3 to 8 weeks. So that's the period between when someone, either an animal or a human, would be exposed to it before they would ever develop symptoms. So we have sort of that window to get some of this preventive treatment in place. The bad thing, if an individual does develop symptoms, then it is that's very likelihood of proceeding to death. It's very serious once an individual does get to that stage.
The dog has been humanely euthanized. The only way that we can actually test for rabies is a test on the brain, so it's only an ante-mortem test.
What we were told was that it had a contact with a skunk. They didn't know the dog had been bit by the skunk, but they knew it had been sprayed by a skunk just from the odor. It was about a 9-month-old unvaccinated dog.
One of the first things to let people know is that the rabies vaccination is very effective. So if you have a dog or a cat or a ferret, it's required by law to be vaccinated for rabies by the age of 4 months, and then a booster in the next year after that, and then you follow your veterinarian's recommendations for the subsequent years. You want to definitely avoid contact with your dogs and cats with any of the 5 high-risk species, which are, as already mentioned, the bat and skunks, raccoons, foxes and coyotes, so just try to limit exposure of your animals to any of those wildlife. Some of the main signs that you'd see with rabies is, first of all, a personality change. A friendly animal may become fearful and hide, or may become aggressive. Also, they can develop paralysis. Sometimes they won't be able to close their mouths. They'll have difficulty swallowing. So any of those signs or any other unusual neurological symptoms, seizures, circling, stuff like that, you would want to alert your veterinarian, especially if there's any chance that your unvaccinated animal could have had contact with one of those wildlife.